Let me show you how I joined 4 crochet squares together using zigzag stitch so you can make your own mind up. Start with a length of yarn that is at least 2 times the length of the total seam that you want to join, and thread it with a tapestry needle. You need one of these because they're blunted, so you're not going to split the yarn. I'm starting with 2 squares and I place them with right sides facing together, putting the wrong sides to the outsides. My squares have 2 corner chains and I will use both of them to start the zigzag stitch off. The square closest to me I'm calling square 1, and the one furthest away is square 2. And the back loop of square 1 is the loop that is closest to me, and the back loop of square 2 is the loop that is furthest away from me. So we're always going to be working into the back loops of these 2 squares. Starting in the back loop of the first chain of square 1, I'm placing the needle from the front to the back, and I repeat this on square 2, placing the needle front to the back and in the back loop only in that first chain. When I pull through the yarn, I'm leaving about a 5 to 10 centimetre end and I'm holding it down with my thumb. Next, I place the needle from back to front in the next stitch of square 2 and pull the yarn through. I repeat that for square 1 with the needle placed from back to front of square 1 and pulling through the yarn. To speed up the process, I can go front to back square 1, front to back square 2 and pull through the yarn, and then back to front square 2 and back to front square 1, always in the back loop. The stitches are making a zigzag pattern from one square to the next, and you're just going to simply repeat that process, going square 1 front to back, square 2 front to back, square 2 back to front, square 1 back to front, back loops only, all the way along the seam join. Now I'm at the corner chains. I have 2 chains at each corner, so I only want to use 1 on each side of this first join. Because of where my zigzag stitch last ended, I'm now going back to front on chain 1 of square 2 and back to front of chain 1 of square 1 to complete the seaming of the first 2 squares. Laying the squares flat, I can tug the 2 yarn ends to zip up the excess yarn. It's quite satisfying. Now if I bring the next 2 squares into play, as I did at the start, their right sides are placed together, wrong sides facing out. I'm then identifying the 1 chain on each side that I will use in the next bit of the join. Because my last stitch finished back to front on square 1, the first stitch of my new square has to be front to back on the new square 1. And we're ready to join these squares in. So I'm placing my needle from front to back of the back loop of the chain of the new square 1, and then from front to back in the back loop of the chain in the new square 2. And you can see that all 4 squares are now connected. Now I just need to repeat that zigzag stitch all the way up the seam, and I'll finish it when 2 of the corner chains are joined, leaving 2 unjoined for when they are seamed to the next part of the crochet. I have a little bit of a gap between my 2 sets of squares, and I'm just going to zip up the yarn and then scooch the 2 top squares down a little, and that completes join 1. To start join 2, rotate the squares 90 degrees, thread a new piece of yarn up, and then place the right sides together with the wrong sides facing out as you did with join 1. Then zigzag stitch the initial 2 corner chains and continue to zigzag all the way up to the corner chains in the centre of the 4 squares. When I get to the centre of those 4 squares, there are 4 corner chains still to be joined. I'll continue to zigzag stitch them together through the back loops of the first 2 squares and then the final 2 squares. Sometimes I can struggle to see what is a chain and what is a stitch. I find it's handy to flip to the right side of the work to identify what is what. And if you're right-handed as a crocheter, if you're working in the round, then your stitches will always have a right hand lean to them, and that's what I use to identify what's a stitch and what is a chain. I've zigzag stitched all the way up the join 2, seaming up to the corner chains, and I've only joined up 2 of those corner chains on each side, leaving 2 for the next join. So that is it. That's how I've joined 4 crochet squares with zigzag stitch. It's okay, but I think the next stitch that I'm going to show you is even better.